to drink to? That's my question.
You know, he had like a couple of beers or something like that.
Today, a judge sentenced Huger to 1 year in jail.
She was found guilty on 7 counts of DUI.
You are a free woman.
I am.
Karen's interview with Andy proved to me that she is still in need of rehabilitation, and I really do worry that Karen is never going to pursue that. After finishing Karen's interview, I had a lot of mixed feelings. The interview definitely did not live up to the expectations that I had, not in terms of entertainment value, but what we were going to see, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it was well done. It was well produced. It was interesting. I like seeing her sister, her moments with Raven, and her son, Brandon. Shout out to Brandon. We need to see more on the TV. Brandon is very cute. I don't remember him being that cute the last time I saw Brandon, but I like seeing him on my screen. Get back to the serious topic at hand, Karen's substance abuse issues. I, like a lot of people, was really looking forward to this. I enjoy Karen on Potomac. I've talked about this extensively, that I think she's needed on Potomac with Giselle. I have missed her this season. Her absence for me as a viewer has been felt. So I was looking forward to this interview, and I went in with this expectation that we were going to see a lot of growth and accountability from Karen. I went in thinking that Karen was really going to knock this conversation out of the park and blow us away and impress us with the way that she's grown from the last time we saw her on our screens. Like a lot of you, that expectation wasn't met. I found that Karen did show growth and accountability. She certainly is in a different headspace than when we last left her, but I still feel like she's struggling with accountability, with accepting the reality of her situation, her decisions, and accepting the reality of the decisions that she's made that has led her to this point. And I definitely walked away feeling like a big motivation for Karen doing this interview was her image and to make sure she's still in a good position with Bravo, the network, to return next season. I felt like she did a lot to clear up certain things in this interview well enough that Bravo would bring her back for next season and would not have any major concerns, but my expectations were just a bit higher. My expectations for this interview were far too high, and I was wrong about some things, which is why this interview shocked me a bit in terms of what Karen was saying. There were 3 things that I was basing my expectations for this interview on. First thing is, I was reading far too much into Bravo's reaction to Karen post-release. I was looking at the tea leaves too much and came away with a wrong impression of what Karen would display in this interview based off the way Bravo has been treating her. The second is I overlooked the depth and breadth of Karen's substance abuse. This interview really tied together a lot of pieces for me to help me understand like how extensive and deep this issue was for her. And the last thing is I overlooked the fact that the American jail and prison system is not rehabilitative. And in conjunction with learning more about Karen's past and the lack of rehab she has actually been involved in, I understand why she is in the space she is now mentally and she's not further along in her progress. Because yes, Karen was in jail for 6 months, but that was punitive, that was not therapeutic, and jail does nothing to rehabilitate people on their road to recovery. So let's first talk about why I had these expectations as it relates to Bravo's reaction. So a theory that I've had over the last couple of years is that Bravo and NBC Universal are much more concerned about the reputational risk and liability that comes from the people that they are employing on these shows. My evidence for this is looking at the reaction to a few situations on these shows and a few of the housewives that have been involved. I believe that Bravo is in a space where they care a lot more about the women and men that they platform and how that reflects on them. And they're taking more care to consider who are we allowing to be on these shows, and is that something we should be allowing based off past behavior? My evidence for this is the reaction to Caroline Manzo and Brandi Glanville. They filmed Real Housewives of Ultimate Girls Trip Season 4 in Morocco. Brandi acted inappropriately towards Caroline. Allegedly, Caroline was very upset, and this led to Caroline suing the network. That whole season, from what we know, has been shelved. I don't think we'll ever see that season because of the lawsuit and the allegations. The second is the reality reckoning that popped up during the pandemic that was led by Bethany Frankel of Real Housewives of New York fame, but then also kind of leaned into the stuff with Nene Leakes and her lawsuit against Bravo. Bethany and Nene had this big podcast episode. They talked about doing another podcast, but they were basically working to sort of expose the inner workings of Bravo and some of the mistreatment. And they wanted to highlight some of the inappropriate behavior that went on. The third thing was Jen Shah's arrest for fraud. The tangible ways that she harmed people, the way that we were able to clearly connect with her victims and the harm and impact that they had on her life, and Bravo's reaction, Andy coming coming out saying Jen Shah will never be on the show.
Speaking of Jen Shah, I just want to say once again, for anyone who is asking, I think I've said this before, she's not coming back to the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. She's not. Won't be anything that I'm working on. I don't know that I could see Bravo working with her again. So,
and then Ramona Singer, who before Real Housewives of New York was rebooted, Ebony Williams had allegations against Ramona for inappropriate behavior. And then when they put Ramona back on another show, Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip, the Legacy Roni season, Ramona made more offensive comments publicly that got her shunned. Since then, Bravo has not touched her. She wasn't even allowed to do promo for that show. And it seems like Ramona is on the blacklist with Bravo. The most recent one is a situation with Kenya Moore, with what she did with Britt Eady and the posters and the allegations against her. So we have some evidence that says Bravo is taking a firmer stance with inappropriate behavior, whether it's on screen or off screen. So with Karen, when I think about her situation and what came out during her sentencing, with Karen, we found out that since 2006, this was her fourth driving-related incident related to her being intoxicated. She hasn't had 4 DUIs, and she wants to be clear about that, but she, in 20 years, has had 4 incidents where drinking was involved. So to me, Karen is someone that carries a lot of reputational risk for the network. Imagine if someone like Karen, who has had this issue for years, has another situation and she hurt someone. How does that reflect on the network that they employed this woman and elevated her and gave her a platform, especially now that all this information is public? So my thinking was Bravo is going to really be looking for Karen to show some accountability and growth before they feel comfortable bringing her back. And based off of how they have received Karen post-release, I thought, oh, she must have knocked this interview out the park. Like, this interview with Andy was filmed a week after release. Karen was released in September of 2025. The interview with Andy was a week post-release. After that, we see Karen go to BravoCon in November in Las Vegas. Karen gets to give out the first award of the Bravos. So she gives out the very first award. She gets to give out the award by herself. She had this big moment. She had a standing ovation. Obviously, Bravo cannot dictate the standing ovation, but they made a big show of receiving Karen, this being her first public appearance post-release. And they really elevated her and treated her like she was very special. Second piece of evidence I looked at was, well, how do they treat this special? The most Housewives seasons are 16 episodes. This one was 17. Karen got her own standalone episode. They could have easily took this footage and shoved it into episode 16. They also could have used this footage and did a split episode with Karen and Wendy's issues, but they still gave her a full episode. So I'm thinking, okay, you're giving her a full episode. You're adding an extra episode to the season. This feels like Bravo loves what she said in this interview, and she's going to show a lot of growth, and she's turned a new leaf, and like, we're just going to walk away feeling so much more confident in Karen's recovery. The last piece of evidence is before this special aired, the women filmed the reunion. The season 10 Potomac reunion was filmed in January. They invited Karen. They didn't have to invite her. She wasn't really on the season. They invite Karen. They make a big show of announcing the fact that Karen is there. When they released the seating chart, it was a big splash and moment. And they bring Karen out and she's in the first chair. It just felt like they were rolling out the red carpet for Karen. And they did all of this after seeing the footage of her interview, but before it aired. So to me, I thought, oh, Karen is gonna really knock this out of the park. Like, we're gonna see so much growth from Karen, and just we're gonna all feel very encouraged about her sobriety. Obviously, I was wrong. I was reading the tea leaves too much. I recognize that Bravo was probably treating a lot of this because they know Karen is very popular. She's a fan favorite, and the ratings prove that. This was the highest live ratings for any episode of Potomac this season, an episode with just Karen. Bravo probably knew that. They probably knew that better than I did, and they were probably building up towards that. And the way they've been treating her was more so a support of the special and wanting the special to be successful than it was an indication that Karen has walked out of jail a totally new, sober person. So I was completely wrong in my assumptions about what Bravo's reaction means. The second reason I was wrong about this interview is until this interview, I did not understand how long Karen has had this issue, how deep it goes. and the way that she is still in denial and some of the coping mechanisms that she uses. So to illustrate this point, I want to talk to you about the timeline. And the thing I want to point out with this timeline is how little treatment Karen has received for an issue we know that she has had now for 20 years. The issue that maybe started with drinking and per her has now moved to an issue with a prescription drug and drinking. It feels like her issue over the 20 years has expanded. The other thing I want to point out when I talk about this timeline to help you understand how little treatment Karen has had is, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, most people with addiction need at least 90 days of treatment to significantly reduce or stop their substance abuse. And studies published in the Journal of Substance Abuse Treatment shows that 90-day plus programs have the best outcomes. So keep that in mind as we talk about Karen's timeline. 90 days is sort of the starting point of some of the best type of recovery that you can pursue. So based off of what came out during Karen's trial and then also what she said in this interview, Karen's first alcohol-related traffic incident was in 2006. She was charged. She says that 20 years ago in 2006, around the time this happened, Ray and her children told her she has a problem. I wonder if she means Raven, because Raven is 28. So I wonder if she means Brandon. I do question if she's saying like Raven at that young age noticed that she had an issue, but she admits that her children and Ray said she has an issue. Because of this, she goes to a doctor, presumably for help. She does not tell us what type of doctor, but she says she goes to a doctor and the doctor prescribes her pills. She says this is the antidepressant. This time, Karen does not mention going to rehab. She doesn't mention starting therapy. All she says is, I go to this doctor, I get these antidepressants, I start taking them. And then we know from 2006 to 2011, Karen has 2 more additional incidents involving driving while intoxicated. That is a total of 3 incidents in 5 years. She still does not mention anything about rehab or therapy or recovery. None of that is mentioned. So I have no reason to believe during this time when she has these 3 incidents, she does any of that. In 2015, they start filming Real Housewives of Potomac. It airs in January 2016. In November of 2017, her mother dies. And then in June of 2018, her father dies. If you recall, during the season 3 reunion, this was a very emotional moment for her and she talks about their passing. In the interview with Andy, she says after her parents died, that's when she started taking a higher dose for her antidepressant, indicating that she was dosing more than was appropriate for herself after her parents died. So I do want to point out that her first incident obviously did not involve any prescription drugs. She does not say the 2 incidents from 2006 and 2011 have anything to do with this antidepressant she's on. The first time she admits to increasing her dosage is when her parents pass away. By June 2018, both of her parents had passed away. And that leads us to March 2024, which is the most famous and well-known incident. This was an actual DUI. That was her 4th incident that related to driving while intoxicated. In February 2025, Karen is found guilty. And before Karen is sentenced, Karen goes to a rehabilitation center. The prosecutors allege that this center, wherever she went, does not sound rigorous enough. They sort of imply that Karen is going somewhere that's maybe not really a real rehab center and it's not really focused on recovery and she does it for optics. Prosecutors do this, right? Prosecutors are going to poke holes in everything you do, especially when they're trying to, motivate or convince the judge to give whatever sentencing they want you to have. We've never confirmed the name of this facility, so I don't know how valid that is. Maybe Karen went to a rehab center that all the rich people go to that's super nice and luxurious, but it's still a valid rehabilitation center. I don't know if what the prosecution is alleging is true, but it's the allegation. What's most important is the time spent there. From what we know, Karen did a month of rehab. So when you consider that Karen has had 20 years minimum of documented issues with substance abuse, and consider how little treatment she's received based off what she shared, I'm not shocked at where she is mentally still with her issue. She hasn't had enough treatment. Like, Karen needs more intensive treatment. If she doesn't want to do something inpatient, there's outpatient programs that she can pursue where she spends anywhere from 3 to 5 hours a day getting focused therapy on this. She also doesn't talk about anything like cognitive behavioral therapy. I hope and assume that she's getting some, but when I think about how deep her problem extends, the fact that it goes back to her sexual assault when she was 19, the fact that it got deeper when her parents died, I do think there's a valid connection to her being unhappy in her home with Ray. Karen has not done enough rehab. What she has done and expressed that she's doing Narcotics Anonymous meetings. There's nothing that supports that those community meetings is a sufficient path for recovery when you're just doing that. Karen will definitely need to do more. And hearing that interview and going back and revisiting some of the details from her case really drove home the point to me that she has not yet pursued the amount of rehabilitation that she truly needs to get over her issue. And the last reason why my expectations were wrong is I overlooked the fact that the American prison and jail system is not rehabilitative. It is punitive. It's not therapeutic. There's a lot of stats out there that show us people go to jail and they are not rehabilitated. They do not come out and they stop the behavior that landed them in jail. We have a problem with our system in this country, the fact that so many people who go to jail do have a substance abuse issue, and jail does nothing for them except maybe they have to abstain from their substance of choice, but jail does not help people recover. The National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University found that 95% of inmates receive zero substance abuse support when they're incarcerated. Many addicts go to jail and still come out struggling because jail does not adequately address their problems. There's many reasons for this. One is most jails do not have the infrastructure to support them. Karen is an excellent example. Karen says that she was the one running the NA or AA meetings in jail. Karen is not licensed. She has no credentials. Karen herself hasn't even done 1 year of AA, yet she's the one running it because there's a need. There's no one else in the jail to run these meetings. So when they try to give support, they don't have the necessary structure or personnel or resources to give the support that is most effective. And when it comes to Karen herself, obviously she didn't get any better because she's the one running the AA meetings. She has no credentials. She's not even focused on her own recovery and rehabilitation because she's trying to run these meetings that she's not qualified to run. Karen running the AA meetings shows how broken the system is, and it shows how inadequate the jail's infrastructure is, that they have unqualified inmates running the program. Nothing wrong with inmates running the program if that is all you have, but you would hope at least you have an inmate that isn't in jail for substance abuse, and maybe an inmate that has actually done some more substantial work in AA or NA classes. But the ideal scenario, if you're really trying to help people recover and rehabilitate, is you would have someone who is credentialed for this. This is what they do. This is what they know. But obviously, they do not care about that, and that's not funded in the American prison and jail system. So when I take that into account, it brings me back down to earth to say, Karen did 6 months in jail. Jail is not rehabilitative. Prior to this, Karen has not done any major significant time in rehab. It's not shocking the place that she's still in mentally. Jail is certainly a punishment, but jail is not going to help her with her substance abuse issue because those are two different things. Jail is punishment. And the research is really clear on this. Treatment works, jail does not. So I really do hope that Karen gets more adequate support and pursues more adequate support and rehabilitation. Obviously, Karen has deep trauma that's totally valid from her assault when she was a teenager. And she says even that she feels like she's been emotionally stunted since that incident. I wouldn't be shocked. She went through a very traumatic experience that often can lead to substance abuse issues. So I hope that she is pursuing something that can help her work through it. I'm doubtful that NA only will help her. And the research says that things like NA and AA are very important on your recovery, but that can't be the only piece of your recovery. But what I really worry about with Karen is, will she be prioritizing getting back to her normal life and filming in Potomac versus her rehabilitation, her recovery? I worry if she's not going to take the time and invest the time necessary to really recover because she's going to prioritize returning to Potomac. So Potomac normally starts to film in the spring. They'll probably start filming sometime in April, which is custom for them. We're in February. This episode just aired. As far as we know, I don't know if Karen has done anything different since this episode. She didn't really talk about a future treatment plan. And again, this episode was filmed 1 week post-release. I'm hoping she comes to the reunion and maybe since she was released, she went to rehab, or maybe she's done some intensive outpatient programs. I hope that when she comes to the reunion, her only commentary is not, yes, I'm going to NA, because I do believe she needs more. But I worry that she's going to prioritize the show because, one, the money, Karen did not get paid for season 10. She probably got paid something for this episode that she filmed, but she wasn't on the season, so she didn't make any money. I believe at this point, Karen probably makes 7 figures a season being on this show, and I'm betting she missed that check. Ray is retired, and I'm sure this is a really important income stream for them, is her being on this show and being paid. The second thing is I believe Karen loves being on this show, ego-wise and image-wise. I was definitely reminded in this interview how much Karen cares about her image. This interview felt like her working on her image. She wanted to be very clear about lots of things, and I felt like a lot of it was still Karen focused on projecting a certain image, and I think season 11, that's something she will continue to prioritize. I believe the show for Karen is a huge part of her identity. The Grand Dame is a huge part of her identity. I think this show gives her a lot of validation and gives her something of a purpose and focus. Initially, when she was charged, she talked about the pressure of being on the show and feeling like she needs to be there for the show and the women on the show. She walked that back in her interview, and I think it's possible she does feel that pressure. It doesn't mean that the network or production is placing it on her. Sometimes we place pressure on ourselves, and it's clear that Karen has this need to help other women and come across as a mother hen. I believe Karen is obviously struggling with a lot of things internally and certain demons, and the show is a distraction. The show is a great way to avoid sitting with her feelings. She talked about the fact that some of the issues with her marriage and Ray's, the kids get older, the house is empty. When you're on this show, you don't have that, right? You film for months, and then you're sort of out doing media, you're out and about. The show kind of becomes this constant hum in your life of activity, so you don't have to sit with the reality of whatever is happening internally or whatever is happening externally in your life and your marriage. The show's a distraction, and I think Karen is someone who seeks out distractions as a way of avoidance, and I think especially now, more than anything, she wants to be apart to get away from thinking about what she's going through. I do think she's performative and struggles a bit with like showcasing some vulnerability. If she were to step away and go to rehab, she'd have to step away from the spotlight, and I do not think Karen wants to do that. Obviously, she loves the spotlight. I mean, the fact that she allowed a camera crew to be there when she was released at the jail and then also at her home. She likes the spotlight. She embraces it. I think she enjoys a lot of it. I don't really see her stepping away from it to go to rehab. I don't think that's her priority. Karen had a really good window of opportunity to go to rehab after she was released. It was released in September 2025. She could have easily went to rehab after she was released. At plenty of time, she could have easily done that and then also still filmed the new season starting in the spring. I'm hoping that's what she did, but I do believe that was her best window of time to really pursue something. Because even if it's not rehab, even if it's an intensive outpatient program, the word is intense. You know, a lot of those programs, you'll spend anywhere from 3 to 5 hours working through your issues through like therapy. So I don't know how she'll have time to do that in film. And I just think that her priority is filming season 11 and returning as the Grand Dame. The other thing I believe that will draw Karen back to the show is she loves to be a mother hen. I've talked about in previous videos the fact that Karen was often a mentor to the newer, younger women. She loves that role, and she replicated that in the jail.
Girls that were there, a lot of them were very young.
Oh, really?
That's okay. I got my hands on them. Okay. And I was able to reach a few of them. I found a purpose.
Karen really should have been in jail, focused on herself and her own recovery instead of attempting to minister to the younger women in jail. But after watching this interview, I believe Karen does that as an avoidance tactic, because when she's in jail running NA meetings and trying to help the 20-year-old girls, she doesn't have to sit with her own feelings and her own issues. She can focus on only the external instead of the internal. I do believe she does the same thing on Potomac. I do think it's valuable. I think it's needed on Potomac, but I can acknowledge that it doesn't really come from the healthiest place. Her need to be this like mother hen role and mentor the young women and show them the way. And I think also why she's going to be motivated to come back to Potomac instead of taking more time, because she needs that role. Like that feeds something in her. And it is a way that she can avoid some of the dark things that she herself is going through. Ultimately, watching this interview, I felt like she was performing recovery in some ways, the same way she gets on the show and performs as the Grand Dame. I believe she said all of the right things to make Bravo feel more comfortable with bringing her back and to feel like we've seen some growth, some accountability from her. She's not as much of a liability or a risk there. Obviously, she still has a lot of work to do, but if her motivation was making Bravo feel more comfortable to bring her back, I think she definitely succeeded. And I kind of think that's part of her big motivation. That's part of her willingness to film so quickly, to have the camera crew so involved in these intimate moments. I think it's her saying, I'm willing to do this with you, Bravo. I want to come back. I'm cooperating. And she said all of the right things to make Bravo feel a bit more at ease with her returning. She even addressed the environment portion. Again, when she was charged, before she was sentenced, she talked about stressors of the show and sort of how she has to show up and how the women lean on her impacted her drinking and her substance abuse. So I found it interesting that she did make a point to address that, to be clear that she's okay being back in this environment, because that will make Bravo feel more comfortable putting her back in that environment, because she said that they worry less about the risk of, if she makes allegations down the line, that Bravo had a contribution to her substance abuse issues. I am curious, now that the show has aired, what Bravo thinks. It had great ratings. It had the highest live ratings of any episode of Potomac this season. So I'm sure Bravo's happy about that, because that's a lot of what they care about. I do wonder if they thought the response would be as negative. I don't really think they care, though. I think Bravo probably cares more about ratings, ad dollars, conversation, driving views, and less so about how their cast is received. But I felt like a lot of the messaging before this aired from Bravo was very positive. I think the messaging from Bravo was far more positive to the actual fan response. Fans have responded a lot more negatively. Some people have been even more negative than even myself. I've seen Karen get dragged a lot by people, and a lot of people who claim that they really like her have been very disappointed in this interview. Again, I don't think Bravo cares. Like, I don't think Bravo cares that they may have platformed someone who is not ready to be platformed, someone who probably still has a lot more recovery to do, and that they should be treating her that way, yet they aren't. One question I would ask is Bravo giving a platform and a paycheck to someone who needs to be in recovery and not in front of their cameras? I think it's a touchy subject, because ultimately Karen is a grown woman, right, who's making her own decisions. But I just feel very strongly that Karen needs more time for rehab and recovery, and I don't see how she's going to get that when she's filming. So I'm rooting for Karen. I'm really rooting for her. I will never root against her. I would never root against anyone that struggles with this type of issue. But I don't feel super hopeful about where things will go. In general, substance abuse is very difficult. Most people are going to relapse. Like, relapsing is not the end of the world. If you have a friend or family member that struggles, you should anticipate a relapse. It is a lifelong recovery, just like Karen said. And I hope that she's as committed as she says. I have a hard time believing it, because there's a lot of things that she seems to be overly focused on that don't feel like it's the most productive thing if she's trying to really recover and get over her issue. But I'm rooting for Karen. I always will root for her. And I do hope that this is something that she can conquer in her life. So let me know what you think. What did you think about Karen's interview? Do you feel like people are being too hard on her? Response has been pretty negative, though she took some accountability. I think most of us just had higher expectations for this interview, even though I do feel like mine were unfounded, and I've come back down to earth a little bit. And do you think Bravo was making a mistake by seemingly bringing her back? Season 11 isn't confirmed, but I do think, based off her addition at the reunion, it seems like pretty much a given that she'll be back next season. And if you are someone you know is struggling with addiction, you're not alone. Nearly 30 million Americans struggle with addiction to some substance, and less than 10% actually pursue any type of treatment, but we do know that treatment works. So if you or a loved one are struggling, I put information in the description box below about resources you can use to pursue help with your addiction. This was a heavier video, but if you enjoyed it, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. And thank you for watching. Karen's interview with Andy proved to me that Karen still needs why am I struggling?